So I was doing a cleanup of my PC and I actually found some very ancient saves of Victoria 2. Seeing that these are older than the actual release of the last expansion, I decided it might be interesting to try and see what was going on back then, if there was anything different, and also kind of a personal curiosity to see how I was playing back then. And the first strange thing to notice is that while the save game actually mentions the CSA, it's actually saved as the USA. And the reason is that back then I didn't know how to cheat, and rather than using the console to tag switch, I will actually save the game and go to the other country to accept the terms. So that's a pretty bad outlook for early first game. And at first we can see that the entire army is in pretty bad shambles and actually all spread out over the map. There's definitely no way I will have won a tactical battle with this composition of an army, but whatever, didn't matter really, since I was guaranteed win with the tricks I was using. Looking at the factories in production, I see it's fairly sustainable, but the party that we have in power is not actually letting us to build or intervene in the economy with the laissez-faire policy. And we are in a democracy, so we're not allowed to actually go and select the party we want in power. We do have to go through the election. I could have started an election, but I think that was not a feature in a house divided expansion, which was the current one when this game was played. In addition to both liberals and conservative actually sharing the laissez-faire policy. As for the reform, I'm actually surprised I didn't do anything about slavery, because it's probably the first reform you should take whatever country you're playing. I don't remember if there was a specific condition that did not allow you to let slaves free when you're playing as the CSA, but the decision was still present that they were not free at the start of the game, which is probably the worst reform choice you can do. Now, taking a look at the budget screen, I actually set the maximal taxation allowed by our current government policies for economics affair, and pretty much every spending is turned off, but I suspect that was probably the AI deciding to turn off everything during the save alteration switcheroo I was doing. As for technologies, we can actually see a fair amount of technology selected for the army, which is normal when you pick the CSA. And since it's only 4 years down the road in the game, I think I was concentrating mostly on industry. And now I have analytical philosophy open, so it's always a great choice to do. And I did grab medicine, which is an excellent technology to select early on. But currently at the moment I was researching fire control system under the Navy, which I have absolutely no idea what I was doing with that choice. Looking at the population, we can see that both national focus are set in Georgia and Louisiana for more soldiers, which is not a bad choice when you start as a CSA rather than the usual clergyman. And if we look at the trade, it did surprise me a bit. I do see I was stockpiling wool, steamer convoys, firearm, as well as lumber, but not cotton, so I'm not sure what I was doing at that level. As for the military, everything looks bad all around. There's very little amount of soldiers I have in my army, and they have high casualty rates, so that's a very bad outlook for the game. No surprise I didn't play it much more after this save. The second most ancient save is actually an Italy player run. I have 2 saves of this run, and one is pre-war France, so we'll take a look at this one to have more detail. I suspect it was the same run in both of them, but I'm not sure exactly which country I start as. So looking at the geographical area we're occupying, we do have a nice sizable proportion of Italy. Of course, that excludes a Tyrol region that Austria has control of. Looking at the production, we see that the factories are overcrowded. They need urgently to be upgraded. They need new industry in some of the provinces with less than, let's say, tree industry. Definitely a lot of work was required to make the industrial score much more sustainable as Italy. Looking at the budget, while we have a very good taxation policy of maxing up everything, we didn't max off the tariff, so we were losing a little bit of money. So using the tariff to the maximum and lowering the class on the middle and the rich, we will force a pop to promote to these classes and have more disposable income to invest into our country. Also, some slight adjustments are required in the expenses. Looking at politics, we can see I assigned the reactionary party, which has the best policy in my opinion in the game, so that was a pretty good choice I did. But looking at the population tab, I only had a single focus assigned, and what I suspect here is that actually the save was made right after the unification of Italy. Looking at the technology, we have a strong emphasis in industry and culture, but otherwise it seems to be fairly balanced for 1880. Most of the important tech has been researched, and we have access to phenomenology and hermeneutics that need to be researched ASAP for the research point gain. Military side shows a bit of weakness, but we have a lot of ships being built. I don't know what was the motive behind that, probably for the colonization, but the man-of-war that was building are not the best for colonization, and I am vastly exceeding the naval supply limit, but I think it was mostly due to how House divided dealt with the naval supplies and the ships and the colonization, which is way different. As for the trade screen, I did have stockpiling order on a weird selection of items. I had a large stockpile for military goods as well as wine and ships. I'm not sure what I was planning with all these stockpiling. But otherwise it's a great start for Italy, already at rank 6 in 1880, a great start for potential expansion. And the next save game is Lucca from 1855. So of course, being an OPM only 20 years after the start of the games, there's not really much to take a look at. If we look into the factories, there was only a single cement factory that was installed, and if we look into the taxation, we can see that the taxation was not maximized and the spending was not maximized either, which is more critical when you play with smaller nations, but of course the total amount of money you make from this is way smaller. Looking at the technologies, we can also see I focused mostly on technology for the first 20 years, but 1855 I started researching medicine, which is a terrible mistake to make. But that is pretty much it for this specific save, so now let's take a look into the Bavarian save of 1873 and a more recent one in 1890. The most important thing to notice is that we're rank 7, which makes us a great power as soon as the 8th one falls off. Looking at the factories, we can see there's 2 closed factories and almost 40,000 craftsmen unable to work. So let's make a quick change to grab a party that can actually allow us to take action on what's going on in our country and not just a laissez-faire attitude. With state capitalists, we can turn back on these closed shops and we can actually upgrade them and subsidize them so they don't go bankrupt again. As for the population screen, I still had the bad habit of not actually using the national focus, so I'm not sure exactly if there was something behind that back then, but a quick turn up will make it alright. And if we look at the troops, we can see that we have access to aerial planes, which is very strong for 1889. Definitely will be helpful for 22 divisions currently fielded. Outside of that, we seem to be very amicable with everyone except Switzerland, which is usually good news when we're a great power and we don't have a dedicated enemy against us. And the next save game is actually Japan in 1908. So let's take a quick look at this civilized nation that will soon become a great power as it is ranking number 6. So the first thing to notice outside of that is that we're currently in a land war against Russia. But not only Russia. But we'll take a look at that later. Now let's take a look at the economy. As for the production, we can see that the factories are pretty well. We have a large variety that is subsidized. And if we take a look at the income, we can see that taxation was not maxed out and the tariff weren't maxed out. And when we do so, we can see there is a massive amount of money we're generating. Definitely a very strong position for Japan. The only real problem will be once we take a look into diplomacy itself. Otherwise, as for trade, I didn't have any weird, quirky, gimmicky trading stockpiling going on in this game. So let's finally take a look at the war. So we are at the Japanese liberation of Bogogibi region, comprising of Japan, China, and Ottoman Empire fighting against Great Britain, Russia, France, Italy, Netherlands, and Spain. So that is definitely quite a weird battle to be stuck into. Might be actually the reason I decided to give up. But at least the current ongoing battles were in my favor, so there's always that. And now we're taking a look at the second CSA game, which seemed to fare slightly better. First of all, if we take a look at the current situation, we have annexed a part of New England from the United States, which grants us a massive advantage in population and industrialization. But we're also at war against a lot of countries, and we're currently invading Canada. And a quick glimpse tells me exactly why we're at war. And it is of course a dual war of containment from both Great Britain and the French. What a terrible situation to be in. A quick glimpse into the factories, and we can see we're in similar condition as the previous CSA game, where our government doesn't allow us to intervene at all into all the states that have problems, and taxation is quite limited, limiting effectively the amount of money we can raise to support and sustain our country in this hardship time of war. As for the technology, there's a slight improvement in the army field. The navy is a little bit lagging behind, but industry is flamboyant with almost everything discovered. Culture definitely needs some work, as we have some quite important technology still waiting for, and otherwise it seems like a pretty balanced military industrial complex. As for the national focus, I decided to use attract immigrant, which just doesn't work as far as I know. Maybe it used to work better back in the day, but I think I was just confused as to what I was doing back then. So let's fix that up with adding more clergymen, the only valid strategy in this game. And this pretty much resumes it for the second iteration of the CSA, doing far better than the initial one. Honestly, I don't know if I cheated or not. I don't remember that far. So now let's take a look at the next challenge that we have after this second CSA. We have another follow-up of the Bavarian, which I just didn't notice before, and another follow-up of the CSA, which I didn't notice before either. And the next up on our schedule is the Russian Empire in 1869. And if taking a look at the production, we can notice that Russia's always late on industrialization in this game. It's pretty terrible. We have very low amount of factories and a lot of empty states left. Very bad startup for Russia as usual. So let's do ourselves a favor and create a small cement factory. Now looking at the taxation, I can see I applied very well the full taxation on everybody, but I didn't take notice of the tariff that could be expended to really increase the amount of money we're generating as the Russian Empire. Of course, we had the possibility of signing the Geneva Convention, but who will do that? Now let's take a look at the population, and we can see I was focusing mostly on clerks to have better industrialization, I guess. And there's an ongoing crisis. Ongoing crisis for Poland. Now I understand why this save doesn't have any follow-up. And now it is time to look at the final save game that predates the release of Heart of Darkness. And it's probably the run that really cemented my love for this game. And it's the first time I actually completed something quite remarkable. I united every Scandinavian countries into one from Sweden, and I remember this game very well. So I sure wonder how I actually played it. So the cultural union of Scandinavia is completed in 1900, and we have a massive Scandinavian Africa, really a shining example of colonization. And I have a blank on exactly how I was working prior to Heart of Darkness, but I remember that it was quite a grind to actually go and capture all these beautiful lands. And while 1900 starts getting into late game-ish, I did have a beautifully industrialized country with a lot of factories, a large amount of foreign investment in all my sphered countries, which is very nice to have. The budget screen was well organized, taxation is fine for late game-ish type, but I didn't have any tariff going on, so I was missing out on some money, even though I don't really have a money problem at this point in the game. Now taking a look at the technology, this is a typical late game technology tree, so most important techs have been researched and now we're just working into the kinks to make sure everything is researched properly. Looking at the population, I did get surprised I used my focus to actually develop capitalists and clerks, which is not something I usually do today, so there was a different technology that may actually spend a little bit more time later on trying to see if it works out properly. And it's actually quite surprising to see Scandinavia as the second great power in the world. Very remarkable game for me from a long time ago. And this final little tour around Scandinavia wraps up my old save games. We went from the earliest save I could find on Victoria 2 all the way to the last one, this Scandinavia run that was played before the release of Heart of Darkness. So things I've noticed different is that definitely there was a lot of change in colonization and in naval supplies, because there's no way I was overextending naval supplies on almost every save I had ships. Otherwise, I am interested to know which of these save were your favorite one, what do you think about it, and what is your own oldest save? Let me know. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. If you did enjoy the video, drop a dislike. But thanks for watching and see you next time.